Everybody, Adam Tracy again, and going or continuing on in my discussions about foundations and crypto projects. One that I've never talked about is the Netherlands STAK, STAK, otherwise known as a Dutch stitching. And the purpose of that, the Netherlands STAK itself, is a legal entity under Dutch law. And it has no shareholders, right? It is governed by a board. So a common structure incorporating the Netherlands STAK is for a company to issue its shares to the Netherlands STAK, almost like a holding company. And then the Netherlands STAK issued what are called depository receipts to individual shareholders. So with that bifurcation, the board of the Netherlands STAK retains the voting rights, whereas the holders of the depository receipts retain the income rights. So when you're thinking about, right, it's sort of like this blurred line with like DAO setups. And I've said this about DAOs before, like nothing can be decentralized at the outset because it's somebody's idea. And if you brought, 10,000 people and gave them equal voting rights, like nothing would ever happen, right? Like, the secret sauce, it's your idea. And now, Bob from Connecticut who put in $500 has as much rights as you to, say or do something, right? And it doesn't make any sense. So the Netherlands STAK is nice because you can take the voting and control rights as to like corporate affairs and just leave the economic rights with the individual investors. So, from an STO perspective, it's great. From like a DAO perspective, it actually works as well, or just maybe not, DAO isn't even probably the right word, but you can sort of retain the rights of control, but issue a cryptographic utility depository receipt, which would allow the individual holders to like access the platform and do what they have to do. And like as a license, as I've discussed before, then you've got a cleaner structure for basically having like an IDO, IEO, ICO, whatever the case may be, right? But you maintain control, right? And that's like the key aspect of it, because it just doesn't work, right? And in a lot of these cases, right, in just like traditional corporate world, especially like pre-IPO companies that are set up this way, at some point, as is the case with, most large cap companies, there isn't one single majority shareholder. Like you see that in the micro cap, some small cap world. But with the Netherlands STAK in a pre-IPO sense, what happens is you have this board, which is controlling the operations of this company. You have smaller investors who have the depository receipts. They're earning dividends that flow through the Netherlands STAK. And then at some point, after multiple rounds of financing, you lose that one or two people who have majority control, majority of the voting rights, and you can turn it over, right? And therefore it becomes this quasi-decentralized entity in the sense that no one person can dictate the affairs of the actual entity, right? So applying that logic to a DAO, and I'm of the opinion, and I've said it here many times before, like you cannot start a DAO in a truly decentralized manner. It's like literally impossible unless you could somehow get thousands of people, right, who are willing to like have pari passu rights. It just can't happen, right? And I mean, maybe you can pull that off, great. But at the end of the day, it's very difficult. So while a DAO may ultimately become decentralized, you can call it a DAO from the outset. It doesn't mean it is one, right? But the Netherlands STAK gives you the ability to start in what's logically going to be a centralized environment, and then when you reach a certain critical mass in terms of users, i.e. those holding the depository receipts, then you sort of flip it into that DAO structure and the board reconstitutes itself, and that's how we kind of continue. But that is a very important distinction, because you don't find anything like the Netherlands STAK really anywhere in the EU or even the US. You find non-for-profits and kind of these different things, but true like foundation where there are no shareholders, but there's a board, right? And like that's really what a foundation is meant to be. And the word, as I mentioned here a million times, it's always misused, right? And even Panama, which is very popular for foundations, which I spoke about before as well, it doesn't even work that way. So, and it's also in Panama. So optics matter, and there's an air of legitimacy. You know, the Netherlands STAK is great in terms of being an EU-based structure that engenders good privacy, asset protection, and inherently can be used very well with either just a series of STOs or even IDO, IEO, ICO, whether it be in the centralized or decentralized context, right? So it's very interesting, and you see now more people catching on to it and drawing from like the equity world and applying that to like DAO-like structures under the assumption, which I think is correct, that you can't just start a DAO and be decentralized. Like, who knows that many people? I don't know. But that's my take on the Netherlands STAK, Dutch stitching, whatever you want to call it. So hit me up if you have any questions. Happy to answer them. AdamTracy.io. I'll talk to you next time. Cheers.